That's a terrible introduction of Jeff Ma. Can I do the Can I do it? You haven't even
hold on.
Dude, you haven't even introduced me and let me host for you.
Go ahead.
Okay.
No, I want this.
So here's who Jeff Ma is. If you remember, there is a book called Bringing Down the House, which was all about the MIT card counters who took millions from Vegas, and they ended up making a movie of that book called 21. And the book was written by a guy named Ben Mesrick. It's a great book. And the star of that book is Jeff Ma. He uses in the book, there is a different name, a pseudonym, because at the time he was employed in a job and he was worried that, that there might be some backlash. But since that time, he's come out of the woodwork. If you watch the movie 21, you will see a cameo of Jeff Ma as a blackjack dealer. Jeff then co-founded and have sold multiple companies. He sold a company. He co-founded a company and sold it to Yahoo. Then he co-founded another company and sold it to Twitter. And he is also a degenerate gambler.
So welcome to
by the way,
has now taken over name.
After dinner, Jeff and I, we're gonna go count cards at the Red Rock Casino, but we've been had.
No, it's now his show. We've taken over. You've been dropped.
What would you like to ask me? Should I just tell you what you should ask me?
100%.
So anyway, the fact of the matter is you and I met at Jeff Ma brought us together.
Correct.
I have known Jeff Ma for 15 years, if not longer.
Because of gambling?
No, sort of because of fantasy sports. So,
Okay.
which is what I do, as a way into the intro. But the first company that Jeff sold was a company that he originally called Pro Trade, which then ended up becoming Citizen Sports Network, which he then sold to Yahoo. He co-founded it with a couple other people, and Pro Trade in its initial incarnation was a fantasy sports game. It was a stock market fantasy sports game, and so Jeff came to the fantasy sports conventions, like they have these fantasy sports conventions, and as you might imagine, it can be a little nerdy. Especially back then, all the people that are there, so I think it was like one of my first conferences as well. And I think Jeff and I sort of looked around at kind of the conference, and it was sort of like, you'll drink, right? And he was just like, you'll drink, right? All right, let's go. And so we just sort of we met and bonded there, and then as anyone that knows Jeff, I've had many adventures with him, as you have, I'm sure. And so anyway, and one of my adventures was him bringing me out to dinner, and he says, you got to come meet my come meet my buddy Tim
in Vegas.
And no, this was in LA.
Oh.
And then my kid, I have a 24-year-old son. Shout out to my son David, who he's the one who turned me on to Menery. He's like, you got to check out this guy on Instagram, Bob Menery. And so I started following Menery, and I don't know, I think we took a picture that night or something like that. Of course. And so I didn't say, and my kid immediately DMs me and he goes like, holy shit, you're with Timmy Bounce Back, and so
Your
he
kid
freaked
DM you, not text you.
No, because I think it was on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
He saw it and he was just, because my oldest son is a fan of Timmy.
I love it.
Breaking news. Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right. It's safe to say it's 2023 and the beard is here to stay. They once again have revolutionized men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard fresh shave look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using the name drop code. That's right, name drop. Insert that code. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping. Let's get right into this. I love it. I've been manscaping since puberty, since I've had hair. I love a clean, sheen body. This thing's amazing for a couple of reasons. One, it's waterproof. It means you could do it in the shower. I rather do it in the sink. I like to look in the mirror and all that stuff, but that's amazing. You can wash it off. Two, it's got one guard. It's got one guard with 20 lengths. I don't know if you can see this, but you can adjust it. The best thing about this is you don't have 20 guards all over your drawers and in your bathroom and stuff like that. It's the worst. It's the worst. Now, if you're really going to groom your beard, your facial hair is different than the hair on your head. It's more coarse, which can cause ingrown hairs. And for me, my girlfriend's going to go crazy. Right now, like my hair's kind of soft. But if I rub up against her cheeks, she's like, oh my God, it's too much. So you have the beard shampoo and you have the beard conditioner. I love them because it's going to preserve the actual oils and nutrients in your beard because it's different than your hair. Then you have the beard balm. This is great because it can tame your beard. And you guys know when there's humidity with hair, it can play all kind of funny, but it also gets rid of the dryness. It kind of keeps the moisture in the beard. Then we have the beard oil. That's what's going to really protect your skin because I can't stand zits or ingrown hairs when I get on my beard. It drives me nuts. Oh, and the most obvious thing is it's cordless. Like this is a fantastic kit. I mean, you got this if you're traveling, it's a little travel kit. I'm so fired up for this. It's like Christmas came late for me. I love manscaped.com. So get 20% off free shipping with the code NAMEDROP at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. And use the code NAMEDROP. Manscaped Beard Hedger, 1 stroke, 1 guard, 20 lengths.
The craziest thing is that night, I've only met Jeff through our interview with Bob.
Oh, really?
Ripper Magoo. So obviously you text and all that stuff. And then Zurif tried to do a show. I'm from Philadelphia.
No way.
And I'm old school betting logic. Jeff is an MIT genius. So Zurif goes, we're going to put you guys together. We're going to have this great new concept, sports concept. First take, no way. It's going to be crazy. You versus Ma. It's going to be great. I'm like, okay. So Ma gives me all the analytics and like, blah, blah, blah. He goes, why on earth are you betting the same bet that I'm betting? You're betting the University of South Florida is going to win this bowl game. And I go, because it's a home game essentially for them. And all of the players are from Florida. So it's like the athleticism. Yeah, whatever. Long story short, Ma put his bets in. I put mine. We both went 8-2. Same bets. Zurif goes, there's no show if there's no arguments.
He's right. I haven't seen the show, but just, yeah, there's no conflict. If there's nothing interesting about.
Correct.
There's nothing interesting about. I agree with you. Oh, I agree with you.
Well, we came from different parts, but he
Yeah.
said the same thing.
Yeah.
But I went, hey, people only want winners. And he goes, for touts. That's what people pay
Sure.
people for answers. But conflict, you know this the most.
Right. For an entertainment show, that's what you want.
100.
Still in 2023.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's-
I think
I
so.
love First Take, dude. I go crazy for it.
Well, I just like everyone makes fun of embrace debate, and understandably so. But the fact of the matter is like people watch that. People watch that show. You know, people. I mean, like it does good numbers for ESPN.
And it does quick hits and quick reels and quick social reactions.
yes, yeah.
But how many people talk about it and just like it's just screaming heads at the same time?
Sure. And it's sort of, this is long. I don't know if you want to go down this rabbit hole, but it's it sort of depends on the goal of the show and what audience you're trying to reach, right? So I don't know anything about the pilot that you guys did, but like if the goal of the show was, hey, we're going to give you betting advice. We're going to tell you, you know, and we're going to take it from an analytical approach, the way Jeff does it, and kind of an old school, you know, folded up newspaper in the back of your pocket approach of you.
Describing me?
Yes. So if if that's the idea, then that's fine. And I think in that particular case, agreement is okay. Because like I do a fantasy football and betting show for NBC as a way of trying to eventually introduce me. People are like, we're 10 minutes into this intro. Who the fuck is this guy? But what I would say is that like what we try to do is we do try to get debate, because you're like, if you're tuning into my show and you're like, should I start this guy? And I say, absolutely, you got to start this guy because of X, Y, and Z. And then my co-host is like, no, you can't start that guy because of, X, Y, and Z. Then you're like, well, hell, what do I do now? Right. But if somebody's watching your show and says, and you're like, I like South Florida because of this analytical reason, this data. And then you say, also, by the way, I happen to know the wide receivers are drunk, whatever it is, and then but my point is that you both like South Florida. Then the viewer at home is like, okay, I feel pretty good about putting some money down on South Florida because two smart people coming at it from different places agree on it. But again, that's only if the point of the show is to give advice, which is sort of the point of my shows. If the point of the show is to be some sort of reality show, and then in which you want conflict, you want Kardashians crying, you want housewives screaming, you want
10 minutes into the show, which one of you is going to do the proper introduction of who we
First
have
of all,
sitting
let's
here
talk about
doing?
this. How great
No, we're
is
not.
Matthew Berry?
You're welcome.
This is $1 million Matthew Berry, the fantasy sports NFL guru, but really he's a writer, which is the hardest thing on planet Earth to be. He's graced us with his presence, and this is called Name Drop.
Wait,
I got
and
away
wait,
from
wait,
the
wait.
show.
Before you ask your first question, I want to go back to you really quick.
Okay.
Not knowing anything about the show,
Oh, I can't wait to talk.
but knowing Tim, what do you think the goal of this show is? Your
Well,
professional opinion.
My
He doesn't
professional
even know the
opinion-
title of the show.
So, well, no, the
He
show's
does.
name dropping. You
Name
just said
drop.
it's name drop. I
love
listen.
it.
So,
It's part of his job to listen.
I assume that that because of the name drop and because of what I know about you, and I don't know that much about you, we become good buddies, but in a short period of time, we haven't spent that much time together. We text a lot more than we've seen each other in person.
Fair enough, for sure.
And so I believe that the show is about you being celebrity adjacent, which is so, because I know two things, right? So number one is I first heard your name by watching Menery's Instagram, right? So, sidekick to Bob, for lack of a better way to phrase it, right?
Sadly.
And so you and I have a friend in common as well, David Spade. And so
Love.
So right. And so Spade is a big fantasy player. And so after you and I met and you mentioned that, I texted Spade and I'm like, oh, hey, I met a buddy of yours.
And he said, run. I guarantee.
No, he didn't say that. I said, I met a buddy of yours, Tim Bader. He said, who? And I said, Tim Bader. And he said, and how did it come up that you guys both knew me? And I said, Tim mentioned it first.
Of course I did.
And he goes, of course he did. So Spade let me know, okay, so Tim's a name dropper, and then the name of the show is Name Drop. And so that is the deduction that I made right
All
there.
right, let's get right into
Nailed
it.
it.
There you go.
Let's get
Nailed it.
really into it about that. That story is perfect. But in Hollywood, and you know this, I'm not even close to sniffing around you yet.
Okay.
To survive in Hollywood, you have to kind of verify yourself. Like, I have been in 25 TV shows.
Right.
I've been in 25 movies. I've been in 150 commercials.
Right.
And
Keep
I
scrolling.
danced and met celebrities. So when I go to a celebrity, which is so weird now because it's all changed, am I a fan or my friend or am I a peer? And the difference between I'm a fan or, hey, Keanu, what's up? I was just at the director of John Wick's house. I'm not going to say it, but you know it. Then all of a sudden it validates.
Pretty sure anyone with a Google could figure out who the director of John Wick is. But
you get it. You get it. Like, you do that, and then all of a sudden they go, okay, this guy's not trying to end my career. This guy's not going to ask me for a picture or anything. And you get on that level. And that's what we laughed about. Like, say, Kat and I talked about it. I'm like, you have, like, that validates you in Hollywood. It's gross. It's shallow,
Here we go.
but it's a big
Just
deal.
crack that up.
Like, look at the way that we became friends.
Sure.
It's just the way it is. And now the thing is, you know, you can trust me. You're on the show right now because
Do you trust him?
I won't do anything there. No, obviously. I mean, you get it.
I mean,
But
so, yeah, I trust you.
You're here.
Actually, you know what? I met you for 5 minutes. Like, you've got your shit together. That much I can
You
tell.
know who doesn't trust anybody
I
on the
have
show?
a
David
mini bottle
Spade.
of wine, Matthew.
There
What
you
are we
go.
talking
God
about
bless.
here?
No, but that is
No, 100%. No, I get it. What if I may rephrase what you just said slightly differently, which is that Hollywood is more than almost any other industry or town, is a true who you know town. It is an entirely relationship based town and industry, and people that aren't in that would be amazed and shocked at how many jobs, writing jobs, directing jobs, acting jobs, how many are given because they just like hanging out with that person. They just like that person. They just, and so yes. So I think two things. I think number one is I think that 100%. And so it's like, having the list of contacts you do is great. And you're right. And that celebrities, especially the bigger up you get, the higher up you get, you become more guarded, right? People become more guarded because so many people like me, and I'm like I'm like a K-list celebrity or whatever it is, right?
Not
I'm like
anymore.
like an X-list.
We're talking
celebrity.
about.
All right,
we're gonna get back.
But
to
my
it.
point. But my point is like whatever. I'm like up until 6 months ago, I was a basic cable sports personality, and now I'm a network TV sports personality. But my point is like I get no, but like here's my thing. My point is like who the fuck am I? Whatever. And yet even I, at my low level, I get hit up for stuff 7 million times. Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you tweet this? Can you make this? Can you invest in this? Can you do blah, 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 blah. And so I personally have always my guard up when people, like you, right. And that's just stupid me, right? Imagine when you get to the level of a Keanu Reeves. I'm assuming that was the Keanu you mentioned and so, that you name dropped. And so you know what I mean? Like when you get to that level, like it's just, it's constant and nonstop. And so you want to protect yourself and, you're always a little bit wary about people's motivation. So I think there is something, I do think you're 100% correct in that there's something to it. And then the other thing I would say is that I actually think, because it's so hard with podcasts and creating content, to find a niche, to find everyone's got a podcast, right? Everyone, it feels like everyone has a podcast. Mm-hmm. And so, how can you do this? And I actually think that the idea, assuming I've nailed the premise of the show, 100%. I like the idea of that you're like that, right? The podcast is all about you being somewhat of a celebrity hanger on, a name dropper, buddy. What? But
you're nailing it.
Right.
You're nailing it.
Can I tell? I want to tell. Can I? Speaking of that particular role, can I tell one quick story?
Well,
a quick story?
I mean, okay. For a writer, you can really talk.
I've literally never told this story on any podcast ever.
Let's go.
But it reminds me because you think about hanger-ons. So this is probably 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was a writer in Hollywood. So I'm a writer in Hollywood. I'm
dying to talk about it.
Before I've ever got to ESPN, anything like that, no one knows who the hell I am. I'm literally just a sitcom and movie writer in Hollywood, but I'm married to a woman.
Please. When did you know you wanted to write? Like when you were an artist, right? And then name drop, who was the person that propelled you in that direction?
Right.
You're here, but you came from somewhere, and I know where you came from.
Yeah.
So, and you traveled a lot. Like, I know you graduated, you're an Orangeman, but when did you really know, fuck it, I'm an artist, I'm a writer? When? I've
written my entire life. Like, I used to, when I was in high school, I had a group of friends, and I would write a little newsletter for our group of friends.
Gang.
We had a gang. We had we called ourselves, we claimed it was a production company. We were just like, basically like, but this is back then before YouTube or anything like that. But we just like had a video camera. We just make goofy videos for ourselves.
Oh,
so like,
that's
it would just be
awesome.
like what kids today are doing on like TikTok and YouTube and everything like that. And so, and I wrote a newsletter for this production company once a week for just 12 people. And so I've always written, I've always,
you have a
always
huge grasp of the English language. You do. Did you always have it, or did you earn it? If you're doing that for your friends,
I think I've always had it, which is the result of being like a nerdy, brainy kid. So anyway, I don't know that there was anyone quote inspired me. There were a lot of writers that I read as a young child that inspired me. I loved the Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, all 5. I've read all those like millions of times. Like, I've got Warren. So I loved those books. There's a humor columnist out of the Miami Herald named Dave Barry, no relation, Barry, that I read when I was a kid. There was a guy named, this is all when I was a teenager, right? Many years ago. So it was, there was a guy named Joe Bob Briggs who used to write horror movie reviews, but really, really funny horror movie reviews, and would like, rate, the gore and the sex, and like, like it was like, and this is like whatever, 20, before that was
graphic.
like,
it was graphic.
It was, it was relatively new territory at that point. There was an author named Carl Hyacin who used to write these great, really funny mystery books. So like those are the sort of the guys that I'm thinking of at the top of my head of books, like just really clever, smart, funny writing. I read a lot as a kid. Yeah.
That's where you were.
Yeah.
So your books might have been your harness of a safety net, and then all that kind of stuff maybe put you into being a writer.
Maybe.
Can we go back to this untold story of Hollywood?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's a funny name drop story, and I think you will appreciate this, and the show will appreciate this. Okay. So anyway, I'm married to my ex-wife at the time, right? So I mean,
you're living in LA.
I'm living in Hollywood. I'm a writer.
What year
and
did you
my now ex-wife, but my first wife, she is an executive at Spelling Television. You remember Aaron Spelling,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my God.
Right?
Victoria,
Beverly Hills,
sure.
Beverly Hills 90210 and Love Boat,
Big
and
time.
legendary Aaron Spelling. My ex-wife had this idea of doing a drama show around Indy cars. If you can imagine, like the F1 at Netflix series 20 years later,
yeah.
but that was her idea, was that the IndyCar series had come to CAA and said, NASCAR's killing us. How do we get more people to become IndyCar fans? And they brought in my ex-wife and Spelling, and they made a deal. And like, we want to do a drama series around, not just the races, but the drivers and and their wives and the drama.
The groupies.
Basically, it's Aaron Spelling, right? So his version was, I want to do Dynasty set in the world of IndyCar. That's what it was. Dynasty Dallas set in the world of IndyCar.
Which is
that was
basically a reality show.
right.
Yeah.
I thought, which is now what would be right.
Right.
So that was the idea, and so as a result, the IndyCar people decide to bring out not only my wife and myself, but 20 some odd celebrities, and I'm using that term very loosely, 20 some odd celebrities to the IndyCar race to experience it. And like, like this is again back in the day, this is like pre-Twitter or anything like that, but in essence, influencers on some level, like just people with followings or whatever. They were going to come and celebrate it, and there'd be seen there. And I don't know how this list got put together, but it was funny then. It's really funny now. So again, I'm there just because I'm married to the Spelling executive that's overseeing this project. But they rent this private plane, this huge private plane, and so again, you can this sort of a timestamp. Here's who's on the plane: Nick Lachey,
Great singer.
Melissa Joan Hart.
Oh my God.
Which of actors?
Right. Christopher McDonald, Shooter McGavin.
Yeah.
Let's see. Chris Judd. Jennifer
Chris Judd?
Yes, J Lo's ex-husband. That was when they're
Basically, it's like anyone who's on the cover of Us Weekly.
Basically, it's
2003.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Let's see, Chris Judd, like a woman named Jessica B, who had like been the runner. I think she had won she'd been the Jesse Palmer, the year Jesse Palmer was the Bachelor.
Awesome.
It was the woman that won the Bachelor or whatever that Jesse had picked. Jessica B. And so it's on and on. It's so that you're getting sort of the level, and also on the plane, Kato Kaelin. So,
OJ.
right? Yes, Kato Kaelin.
Are you really
who
bringing
is
OJ?
huh?
Are you really bringing this back? Okay, fine.
But what Kato Kaelin was known, and is still known as like world's most famous house guest, right? The world's most famous hanger-oner, if you will, whatever, adjacent.
Wait, I know where this is going. Wait a second. Hold on.
Hang on. Trust. You wanted me to trust you. Trust me.
Oh, I know.
You don't know where this is going.
Lean in.
I know where this is going.
All right.
You've already won.
All right. So, okay. So we're on a 4.5 hour private plane to Indy, and they've got booze on the plane. And so by the end of the flight, we are all hammered and best friends. All of us. Best friends.
Not hard for you.
Right. No. We're all, and everything like that. And so we all get that, like, we're all hammered and we get there, and we all like, should we all keep going out? Yeah. All right. Meet in the lobby in 10 minutes. Okay. Everyone goes over to the rooms that, we come down and we're sort of trying to figure out where it is. And it's the Friday night before the Indy 500 car race. Okay. And so every place is packed. We've made no arrangements. We're a group of 20. Right. And candidly, and I say this with much love to all those people on the plane, because I love them all. Like, I haven't talked to any of them in 20 years, but they were all lovely. They were all really, really wonderful people. But the fact of the matter is I don't know that there was anyone on that plane that was so famous that, whatever, Robert Downey Jr. walks up to a bar, it doesn't matter how crowded it is,
Even
right?
in Indianapolis.
Right. Even, yes. You
All right.
understand what I'm saying, right? Keanu Reeves walks up to a bar, it doesn't matter. But some of these, Chris Judd walks up to a bar there, I don't know necessarily that, they're immediately like, oh my God, it's Chris Judd. Let's, whatever. Chris Judd, lovely person. I mean no disrespect to Chris Judd, wherever you are may. But what I'm saying is, anyway, so we're going through the streets trying to figure out where 20 of us can go keep drinking. Right. And all of a sudden, Kato goes, I got it. And Kato goes to a bar, and the person sees him, and like they slap high five and they hug. And then immediately we're shown in, tables are pushed around. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're hooked up at this bar because Kato somehow knows these people.
What are you doing?
Hang on. So anyway, we have a great weekend. 6 years later, I'm at an NBA All-Star party, like a party that the NBA All-Star game was in LA, and I was no longer living there. I was now in Connecticut, but I'd come out to LA for the
2011.
Right. Yeah. So for the NBA All-Star game, great memory. And so, I'm at the party, I'm with a friend of mine at the party, and Kato's there. And I turned to my friend, I said, you want to meet Kato Kaelin? And my friend's like, yeah, why not? And I'm like, and I tell him the story I've just told you. I said, I'm sure he won't remember me, but like, whatever. I think once I talk to him about the flight, he'll be like, oh yeah. And anyway, so I go over to him, and again, 6 years later, I go over to him, and again, I've not been on TV at this point. I was the husband of the spelling exec. So I walk up to him and I said, hey, Kato, excuse me. And he turns and looks at me. He's like, Matthew Berry, Indy, baby. Without missing a beat. And I have to tell you something. So this is the part I didn't tell you. Kato Kaelin.
Real. It was authentic.
And I have to tell you something. Like, again, without getting into any of the OJ stuff, I will just tell you that weekend, he's like the best guy. He's like the life of the party. And it's like one of those things, like after you met him, or at least for me, for that one weekend, I was just like, totally get it. Like the nicest, most genuine, most self-deprecating, funny guy.
Still looks great.
Everyone still looks great. Everyone loved him. I forget what it was. I said, I think it was something like this. I was introducing myself, and they're like, oh, what are you doing here? I'm like, I just pointed at my wife at the time. I'm like, I'm just tagging along. And Kato's like, that's all I do. I mean, like self-deprecating, like charming, fun, and like
kind of a
immediately
romantic
remembered,
life,
like had a clearly has like some sort of like, anyway. So that's but my point is, of all this bringing around is that I think that you have a very similar quality to you.
Do I?
That people really like you and trust you, and you charm your way into a bunch of crazy situations. Fact of the matter is that prior to meeting him, I thought I had an impression of Kato Kaelin that he's like, oh, you're just like some sort of leech. You're just some sort of like, this is Kato, dude, not you. I'm saying that my impression of Kato was that he was, you're just some sort of leech. You're just some sort of weird house guest, blah, 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 blah.
You are comparing me to a man that leased off a murderer. Matthew Perry, your picks are totally. We're nuking your picks. No, I'm kidding. You're very charming.
Not comparing you. I was merely saying that I do think, taking this all back to what we were talking about.
I'm charming.
You're charming, and that I do think there is something funny and interesting about a podcast about somebody that is, like I said, somewhat celebrity adjacent. And the reason I've seen some clips because I follow you on the gram. I've seen some clips you've had for, what was this, episode 14, episode 16 of this podcast, something like that. So my point is that you have had for the first 16 episodes of a show as ridiculous a cast list and guest list as anyone. And I think anyone that didn't know you would be like, how the hell is this? I don't know who Timmy Bounceback is, but how is he getting all these guests, all these ridiculous guests on a show? And it is because people like you and trust you, and whatever impression they may have of you before they know you, it changes there. And so that is the mere point.
And I thank you for that. However, that being said, nobody comes on my show that I don't love.
There we go.
And revere. Like, it's crazy. Like, I dropped off Jeff that night, pulled away, and he's like, dude, you didn't tell me you were there. I know who you were. And he said, come back. Dude, I met you in 2 seconds. You're like an immensely impressive guy. Immensely. Because writing's the hardest thing in the world. You know, and I know. And you were so kind and so charming. And there was another guy with us that night who was also very generous and sweet. We had the best night ever. So
it was an epic dinner.
It was an epic dinner.
Yeah.
It was an absolutely epic dinner. But I didn't recognize like that you came from such a hard writing background. How would I know? Like, you were in fantasy football. I'm like, this guy's just a gambler guy, like Jeffy, me. And dude, I gotta come to George Carlin.
Sure. I've had the weirdest career ever. I have the weirdest career ever.
How did you even like be in that guy's universe? It's so crazy to me. I have a big deal of reverence for him. And the fact that, I don't know if it was good or bad, because I heard he was a bit of a monster. But I mean, how did you write for that show? It's insane.
So a couple of things. So I never wrote for that show.
What? Wait a second. Am I out of my mind?
No, sort of. I'll tell you the George Carlin story. Here's the George Carlin story. So I've had the weirdest career ever. So the answer to how I got into his universe, because I was in his universe, but I never wrote for the show. I want to be clear about that. There's two big things that you made a mistake there in setting that up. Number one is I never wrote for George Carlin or his show. And number two is wasn't a monster, the loveliest guy in the world.
That's how I feel. I'm in love with him. I adore him.
I knew him personally. I was his assistant for a year. That's what it was. I was his assistant for a year.
Fucking
And that was one of my first jobs in Hollywood when I came out there to try to make it as a writer. I got a job. Technically what I got a job as the stage production assistant on the first season of the George Carlin show, which was a sitcom that ran on Fox. So I'm the stage PA, but it's the George Carlin show and he's George Carlin. So my bosses were like, make sure George has everything he needs. And then if you have any time, you can help out with the rest of the cast, but it's all about George. So in essence, I was, and this is pre-cell phones. And this is 1994, I think maybe 93, 94, somewhere in there. And I would take messages for him. I would get his lunch for him. I'd pick up his dry cleaning. I would when we, he would when the writers would do rewrites on the scripts, I would drive to George's house. I would hand him the pages. George would handwrite. George didn't like email. So George would handwrite jokes. I would sit there and wait while George handwrote jokes on the pages, and I would drive it back to the writer's room. So anyway, the loveliest. So, I mean, I literally worked for him for a year. And so if he was a monster, I would have seen it, and I never saw. Not only was he never anything but unbelievably amazing to me, he was amazing to everyone. I'll tell you
one of my heroes.
I'll tell you a great George Carlin story in a second. But just to answer your question in terms of how I got there, when I was in college, I went to Syracuse University, and I was a massive fan, like everyone was back in 1992. That's when I graduated Syracuse, of The Simpsons, right? And so we invited Sam Simon, the late great Sam Simon, to come out and speak to us as college kids. So it was all of us were in. I was a writing for TV and radio major, and so he came out and he spoke, and he was brilliant and charming, and so I developed a little bit of a friendship with him. But more importantly, I developed a friendship with his assistant, because her and I went back and forth for like a month and a half, arranging his travel, getting him there, all the logistics. And so when I graduated college, I said, do you think, and I need a job. And so, she put in a good word for me, and Sam liked me. And so Sam hired me. Sam was the creator and the executive producer of the George Carlin show. And so Sam hired me to be the stage PA for George. And I've never even heard other people say he was a monster.
I watched the HBO thing, and I'm late to the game.
I didn't watch that, but
he's one of my heroes.
He's brilliant.
And I wanted to lead it into, like, if you had any bad things.
I
love him.
No, I love
Unabated.
that man. I love that man. I'll give you two quick stories. I'll give you two quick George Carlin stories, and I've written about these before. But so I just told you everything that I sort of do for him. And so my first month that I'm there, my best friend from high school and his girlfriend are going to come visit me. So it's my first time. I haven't lived in LA that long, and it's the first time I'm having somebody, from my hometown come out. And so I go to George, and we were doing a show that night, and they were going to come to the show, right? So I go to George and I say, "Hey, George, listen, I know you usually have a couple of errands for me to run for you after the show, but I have some friends from out of town coming to the show tonight, and after the show, I was hoping to take them down on the stage and show them around and give them a tour. So if it's okay with you, could you tell me whatever you need me to do after the show, and I could take care of it now for you?" And he goes, yeah, sure. Just I need you to do, this, pick up this, and whatever, call this person and blah, blah. I go, great, thanks, George. Okay. After the show, I'm walking around with my friend and his girlfriend, and I'm showing him, like, and here's where the cameras are, and that's what the key grip does, and blah, 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 and the whole thing. I'm trying to show off, right? It's it's my big Hollywood job. Now, again, I'm the stage production assistant. I'm the lowest of the low. I answer phones. I Xerox scripts. I pick up laundry. So I'm showing them around, and I'm trying to, show off a little bit for my high school buddy from Texas. And all of a sudden, George walks up to us, and he goes, "Matthew, are these your friends?" Yeah. Sean and Cindy, George Carlin, George, Sean and Cindy. And he's like, he goes, "Matthew has told me so much about you." And then George goes into the big sell. He goes, "I have to tell you, we could not do this show without Matthew.
Oh, no.
I consult with him every single day. Oh, he is a key cog. He's going to be a big star in this town. I can't tell you how important he is to everything we do here at the George Carlin show." And he's holding two scripts. He's like, "Hey, he's two autograph scripts." He goes, "Here, and come on, let's take a picture. Let's take a picture. And hey, what have you guys done when you're in LA? Here's a restaurant you should go to. How'd you guys meet?" Spends like 5-7 minutes with them. And, and George's like, "Okay, well, I got it, but like, and I'm like, so they're walking on air, they're like, "Oh my God." Right. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God. So the next day I go to George. I'm like, "George, oh my God. Thank you so much. That made their night." And he goes, "Listen," he goes, "first off, happy to do it." He goes, "I'm happy to do it. First off, you're a good kid. You work your ass off. Pleasure to do." He goes, "But more importantly," he goes, "the thing about your friends, about Sean and Cindy, for the rest of their lives, the next time George Carlin's name comes up, they're going to say, I met Carlin once. He was actually a pretty nice guy." As opposed to as opposed to, I met Carlin once, wouldn't even sign my album or whatever. He goes, listen, 30 seconds of my life for a lifetime fan, I will make that trade every single day. And so he goes, so listen, you know this, if you ever need me to sign something, you ever need me to talk to somebody, you ever need me to, it hadn't hit me until that moment because I was just sort of head down and trying to do whatever George wanted me to do. But as he's saying, I realized like, oh yeah, one of my duties almost every single day is delivering signed memorabilia, autographed pictures, or, people, this is how old this is, concert albums that he would sign and that kind of stuff, and comedy albums and everything like that. And that I would watch him, he would leave the stage and it didn't matter. Like he would leave the stage and he couldn't even walk from the stage to his car without somebody, can I get a picture? Can I get an autograph? And he always stopped. And he was gracious.
The John Lennon, dude. Always keep walking.
Always. And he would, so he's just like, always bring me those requests. Never apologize for that.
Hold on, please. So that being said, Matthew and I have, David Spade, could you maybe
name drop,
be a little bit more kind to your fans? When you listen to this, Matthew's letting you know how George Carlin treated his fans. David? Don't worry. He's going to love it.
Okay. David's been nothing but great to me. I will just tell you that.
He's the most gracious guy ever. Trust me.
I love Spade. So
he's the same way as George is. You know who else is like that? I said John Lennon and all, because John Lennon said you always give to your fans but never stop walking. Shaq. Shaq never, ever doesn't give to everybody, but he never stops walking.
Well, he can't. So
here we go.
I got another story. I got a good name drop story for you. Name drop story.
I feel like you're going to be a reoccurring guest.
Okay, fine. Happy to do it anytime. Anyway, but that was Carlin. And so I've always tried, not that like I'm, 1/1000th of whatever, but when people stop me and want fantasy advice or whatever, want a picture, I'm always happy to because of what I learned that from George. So it's just funny about the keep moving thing. I'm now with my now wife, we've been together 15 years.
That's
and
awesome.
We're at a Super Bowl party, and we somehow got invited as like some pretty small, like, most Super Bowl parties are like these massive warehouse things and everything like that. But this was like, I think it was a Mercedes-Benz thing. It was like in somebody's house and it was like 200 people. Like it was really kind of small and intimate.
Yeah, boutique.
Yeah. And so we walk in. This is like our second or third party. So, we've pre-gamed a little bit here. And so my wife's had a few. As we walk in, I say to my wife, Beth, I go, oh, and I point out, I'm like, oh, hey, Hugh Jackman, Wolverine, pretty cool. Like this, hey, like I'm just pointing out, like, hey, that's pretty cool, right? And I see we were meeting some friends. So I see my friends at the bar. I'm like, oh, there they are. Come on, let's go. And so I start walking to my friends at the bar. And I'm like, and they hadn't met Beth yet. And I'm so like, hey guys, just wanted to say, this is my wife, Beth. And I look over and I see Beth making a beeline to Hugh Jackman. And I'm like, oh my God.
I would have too.
And like she's hammered at this point. And I'm like, oh my God.
So was I.
So and I'm like, oh my God. And so now I'm running over to her. And I get there just as she just walks. Hugh Jackman is there with his wife. And I see her walk right up to Hugh Jackman and do this. She goes, I forget your name, but I know you're Wolverine and my kids love you. And I am horrified. I am horrified. I am horrified.
He was pumped.
And I will tell you, there is 8 million responses that Hugh Jackman could have done in that moment, and any one of them would have been justified. And what he does is he goes, well, please thank your kids for me. I'm Hugh.
Handsome.
Right?
Shivering.
Amazing, right?
Shivering.
Amazing.
Shivering.
And I'm like,
such grace.
Right. And I just said, Hugh, oh my God, such a huge fan. Thank you. And he goes, this is my wife, And so, and then my wife, not my wife, who like, we should have immediately then just like, thank you for not getting us thrown out of here. You're incredibly gracious. You handled that with so much class. I can't believe it. Instead of that, my wife just immediately starts typing in, so do you guys have kids? Okay. So, and they're like, oh, we do. And we have a 10-year-old. And my wife's like, we have a 10-year-old.
Oh, no.
So next thing you know,
That fucking
I'm in
bad.
in a 10-minute kid conversation with Hugh Jackman and his wife, me and my wife, and we're just talking about kid stuff. We're just talking like 10-year-olds. Oh, does he do this? Because ours does this. Whatever. We're just talking parent crap. And so, okay. So, and then eventually I get my wife out of there and we leave them alone. Okay. 5 years later, Hugh Jackman comes to ESPN. Hugh Jackman comes to ESPN and he's doing what we call a car wash, which is where you do interviews with a bunch of different shows. That's the phrase they use at ESPN. And so he's going to do our show. And I told the story.
What was it for? Great Showman or?
It was for Days of Future Past. It was an X-Men movie. So Days of Future Past. And so, and I told the story I just told you. I mentioned it on the air to my hey, we got Hugh Jackman coming up. And I tell the story I just told you. And I'm like, I wonder if he remembers. And we're like, he's not going to remember. And I'm like, he might remember. Anyway, so we get Hugh on the show. And I tell the story to Hugh, what I just told you. And I told him a shorter version, of course, but do you remember us? And we talked about this and you guys were just about to go to Egypt and blah, blah. So, and he goes, I want to be honest with you. I don't remember. He goes, but he says, I will tell you this. If we talk for 10 minutes, I really enjoyed myself because because here's the key. This is something I learned from Clooney. He goes, you always keep moving. He goes, so the fact that I stayed there and talked to you guys for 10 minutes means I absolutely
Comes
had.
from John Lennon. Though.
He go, right. So he just said, Hugh Jackman credits Clooney. You can bring that up with them on a future name drop episode. But I just,
oh, what a class move too.
right?
Yeah.
So great. He was just like, yeah. He goes, you shake their hand and you say hi, but you never stop.
Yeah.
That's the Clooney move, which I get because Clooney's one of those guys like Lady Gaga, like Taylor Swift, like there are people at that level that literally can't move.
Yeah.
Like LeBron, like you can't stop moving. Otherwise you'll never,
Shaq.
you'll never, everyone wants a picture.
Yeah.
You're that famous.
Dude, I
You're
called
that beloved.
Shaq the Black John Lennon. He loved it. He goes, why do you call me that? Because you said you never stop walking.
There you go.
It's the truth.
Yeah.
That is the fucking goddamn truth.
Do you get horses?
No.
Okay.
Just
That's a level of degeneracy that I'm not
We
at
know.
yet.
We're
All right,
aware.
but hold on.
But you know what?
We're
I
quite
am.
aware.
I need to actually
Nope. Massive
consult with you,
transition.
and
You
I'll
want to
tell you
come to
why.
the school of
Massive
Invader.
transition is coming.
Well,
to you.
because I believe I'm going to be part of NBC's coverage of the Kentucky Derby this year. So they've talked to me about
I'm
that.
going.
No, they're
We're
going to get
going.
me. They're going to get me out
How
because
can
I'm
we
not going to
name
claim that I'm a
drop to,
horse
like,
betting
come
expert.
hang?
They're going to get me a horse betting expert. But we're going to talk. They're going to be a pick'em fantasy game.
Have you been to the Derby ever?
Never. I'm really excited about it.
Your head's gonna spin.
I've heard it's great. I've heard it's an amazing event. I can't wait.
It's 110,000 people.
Yeah.
And the minute they break out of the gate, the roar of the crowd. And this is very primal and dumb, but every fiber in your body is like, oh my God. At that moment, it's the only thing you care about. It's the only thing you care about for 2 minutes. And you watch it and you think you know something for that. And these thoroughbreds, these great animals, one of them wins. It's insane. I will be there.
Good. Awesome.
Right next to you. Before you worked in sports, did you have a sports bucket list, like sports event bucket list?
Yeah, Super Bowls. I
Was
think,
it?
I've been asked this now, like what have I not been to? And like
Right.
Kentucky Derby's on the list.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. As a
I've never been to
gambler.
the Olympics. I'll get to go to the Olympics as part of
Yeah,
NBC's
NBC.
team. I'm going to be part of their coverage in Paris. And I've never been to like Wimbledon. That would probably be cool.
I have to come back to this.
Okay.
When I met you, you were transitioning
Correct.
between networks. So this
Important word of networks, because you were transitioning and then somebody tunes out and like,
No.
fuck.
This is the
That's
biggest.
that's an important sentence to finish, right?
No.
Yeah, it's a hard.
It's
That's
the
a,
English
don't, LG, don't fuck me on the edit. LJ, do not fuck me on the edit there.
There's no edit. But the thing that's most important for me is I did some research. You got to the place.
You're so proud of doing research, like your podcast host. I actually looked shit up. This is Tim.
because
saying
no
it.
one else
Oh,
does.
That's fair. That's fair.
I've done 2 podcasts with the guys like, who are you? And I'm like, the janitor. And he goes, I'm waiting for bounce back. I'm like, he's coming in 2 minutes. And I'm in the room sitting with the guy that's about to interview me. It doesn't even recognize that I'm fucking bounce back.
Yeah.
But the most important now, you guys think that I am not as smart as I am. There I was. The one night with this guy. Dude, your accolades. You worked for everything. You're the fantasy football guru. And this network thing. When we talk about name drops, who helped you, who didn't help you, you don't have to say who did or didn't, but that was a big deal to leave one network and go to another network.
It was.
It's
I was really
fucking
nervous.
big deal.
It was really.
It's traumatic.
Yeah. It was. I was definitely definitely nervous about that, and had a lot of sleepless nights. Because I was at ESPN for 15 years, and I felt like on some level, I built the fantasy department at ESPN. And
you did.
No,
it's not at any level. Yes, the answer is you did.
I had a lot of help. I had a lot of help behind the scenes. But regardless, it's something I took a lot of pride in, and meant a great deal to me. And it's my home, and I sort of, I knew I had the place wired, and even though the place wouldn't do everything that I wanted it to, or I didn't always get the results I wanted. The fact of the matter is like I knew how to navigate the place. I knew
You were comfortable.
I was comfortable. I knew I knew at the high levels, I knew who was fans of mine and who wasn't, and how to navigate and how to sort of, and so it was really nerve wracking. And obviously, there was one of those things where I was like, wow, am I really giving up the number one job in what I do? Right. I mean, ESPN's the biggest fantasy platform, and I'm the number one guy there. And like, am I really giving up like the best job in the industry? And so there were definitely a lot of nights where I sort of woke up in a cold sweat. The thing of it was that, I've talked about this before on other podcasts, but what I will say is that I knew that my contract was coming to an end. There was going to be, and so ESPN was very gracious, and ESPN said like, look, we're big fans. You've been here 15 years. We'd like to extend you. We want you to keep you around for another 3 years, give you another 3-year extension. And we'd like to give you a raise, and so, all great. There's one little thing. You have this business, Fantasy Life, fantasylife.com, and the Fantasy Life newsletter, Fantasy Life app. There's a bunch of, I wrote a book in 2013 called Fantasy Life. It was a New York Times bestseller, did really well for me, spent a bunch of months on the list. And so off of the success of that, I thought I could build a brand around Fantasy Life, and I've done so. And so, and they were like, and so, we've raised money, we have investors, we've raised money and blah, blah, blah. And so they were like, we want you to give up if you're gonna come back to work for us at this point, because Fantasy Life is starting to do a bunch of stuff in sports betting, and they felt that would be competitive to what their potential interests were in sports betting, especially given I'm the face of fantasy and potentially betting, and so they basically said like, we want you to stay with us another 3 years, and but you're gonna have to give up Fantasy Life. You have to give up all your outside stuff, and I didn't want to, and I didn't want to. And so, yeah. And they knew that. And so as I contemplated that, my agent started calling around and saying like, hey, Matthew Berry might be available. Any interest there? Is there any, would be there? And, we were very flattered that a lot of people were like, yes, absolutely. If he were a free agent, we would very much like to have him, and we would be willing to pay him in this range and blah, blah, blah. And so I felt pretty confident after having those conversations with both my agents and then subsequently some of those companies, that if I left ESPN, I would be able to, have excel, to have an opportunity. And so, I announced that I was leaving ESPN, and people were incredibly gracious online, and as I said to my wife, I said, it's very cool. It was very cool to be trending on Twitter and not be dead.
Yeah, everyone loves you, dude.
Or canceled. Or canceled, right?
Yeah.
So it was really cool. And then, but NBC, so I met with NBC, and I had a number of meetings with NBC, but NBC basically said to me, they said, number one is, we love you, by the way, and we'll beat what ESPN was paying you, or offered you. We'll beat what ESPN was offering you. We will also, by the way, in terms of Fantasy Life, we have no problem with it. We're like, they point out, they're like, look, Chris Collinsworth owns Pro Football Focus. Mike Florio owns Pro Football Talk. Jim Cramer owns his investment club. Like, we are comfortable with our talent having outside business interests. Well, no. And then they said, so we will let you keep all the fantasy life stuff. We will have you do sports betting and fantasy around of our biggest properties, the Olympics, the Indy 500, the Kentucky Derby, so on and so forth. And oh, by the way, we will put you on Football Night in America as a full integrated cast member of the show. You will be part of the #1 pregame show in all of America. It's the highest rated show on television, not the highest rated sports show, not the highest rated sports show. It is the highest rated show on television, beaten only by the actual game itself on Sunday night. And so, and honestly, like, don't tell NBC this, but like, if they'd given me 2 of those 3 things, I would have been there. But when they give me all, we'll pay you more money. We'll let you do fantasy life, and we'll put you on Football Night in America. It's like, where do I sign?
Yeah.
Where do I sign? And so NBC has been so incredibly gracious and amazing to work with. And everything they promised, not only did it come true, but they've over-delivered. As they've said to me since I've talked to them, and I've just been like, you guys, over-deliver. That's always our motto: under-promise, over-deliver. And it's come true. And it's like, I could give example after example of examples they'll do, but I'll give you 2 very quick ones since we're on the Name Drop podcast.
Oh, there we are.
I got texts from, and this is when, like, first day. This is like middle of the year. I got texts from a man named Pete Bevacqua, who is the chairman of NBC Sports. He runs all of NBC Sports. And I also got a text from Jeff Shell, who is the CEO of NBC Universal. Like, he runs the entire, like, the theme parks report to him, like everything, right? It's NBC, Universal Studios movies, and all the various NBC networks. And they've both, over the course of my, 5 or 6 months I've been there, they will occasionally text me and just say, hey, great job. Hey, I saw your show today. Really great job on that segment. Hey, I'm so happy you're part of the NBC family. So great. And, and Pete will be like, hey, is everything okay? Is there anything else we can do to help you succeed? Is there anything else you need? Like, there's so
personalization. It makes you feel special.
I feel like they are very invested in me. They could not be more supportive, helpful, kind. It's incredible. And I just want to point this out. I say all that with no disrespect to people. Always want to, like, I left ESPN with hugs and handshakes. Like, I met my wife there. I have lifelong friends there. I'm really proud of the work I did at ESPN with ESPN. I have nothing bad to say about ESPN. I'm very happy at my new place.
And it seems like you kind of bet on yourself 100%. In this circumstance again.
I did.
I love you, dude. I love watching you progress. Who doesn't? Who doesn't love Matt Berry? I mean, are we out of our fucking minds? Everyone loves him. Dude, thank you so much for coming on this show.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Name drop. This wraps up Vegas and name drop Matthew Berry, Tim Bader. We gotta go. We got the fuck out of Vegas.
There you go.
Yeah.